The year was 1939. Across the globe, an uneasy peace prevailed. Yet beneath the surface, tensions simmered. The First World War, a conflict of unprecedented brutality, had left deep scars on the world's psyche. Millions lay dead, empires had crumbled, and a sense of disillusionment pervaded society. From the ashes of this conflict, a new threat arose: totalitarianism. Fueled by economic hardship and nationalist fervor, dictators seized power in Germany, Italy, and Japan. Their ambitions, cloaked in promises of national glory, would soon plunge the world into a maelstrom of unprecedented destruction. World War II. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended World War I. However, it sowed the seeds for future conflict. The treaty placed harsh penalties on Germany, including territorial losses, disarmament, and crippling reparations. This fueled resentment and economic instability within Germany, creating fertile ground for extremist ideologies to take root. Meanwhile, the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires, once major powers, dissolved, leaving behind a vacuum of power in Europe and the Middle East. New nations emerged, but their borders often reflected the victors' interests, leading to further unrest and ethnic tensions. In Germany, Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party capitalized on the nation's humiliation and economic woes. Preaching a toxic mix of nationalism, anti-Semitism, and racial superiority, Hitler promised to restore Germany to its former glory. His message resonated with a population desperate for stability and a return to greatness. Across Europe, similar movements gained traction. Benito Mussolini's fascist regime took hold in Italy, while in Japan, militarists, fueled by expansionist ambitions, tightened their grip on power. The world watched with growing apprehension as these totalitarian regimes, united by their disdain for democracy and international cooperation, began to flex their muscles. On September 1, 1939, the world watched in horror as German tanks rolled across the Polish border. World War II had begun. Hitler's blitzkrieg, a lightning war of rapid movement and overwhelming force, quickly overwhelmed the Polish defenses. Britain and France, bound by treaty to defend Poland, declared war on Germany. What followed was a global conflict unlike any seen before. From the beaches of Normandy to the deserts of North Africa, from the frozen steppes of Russia to the jungles of the Pacific, the war raged on, drawing in nation after nation into its deadly embrace. Section 5. A Descent into Darkness. The Holocaust and Other Atrocities. World War II was not merely a clash of armies, it was a war against humanity itself. The scale of destruction and the depth of human suffering were unprecedented. Cities were reduced to rubble, and countless lives were shattered. The war brought out the very worst in humanity, as ideologies clashed, and innocent civilians bore the brunt of the conflict. Fueled by racial hatred and twisted ideologies, the Nazi regime unleashed an unprecedented campaign of genocide, the Holocaust. This was not just a war of conquest, but a war of annihilation. The Nazis sought to exterminate entire populations, driven by a perverse belief in their own racial superiority. Propaganda was used to dehumanize their victims and justify the atrocities committed. 6 million Jews, targeted for their religion, were systematically murdered in concentration camps across Europe. These camps were designed for efficient mass murder, with gas chambers and crematoria operating around the clock. Families were torn apart, and entire communities were wiped out. The sheer scale of the Holocaust is almost incomprehensible, a dark chapter in human history that must never be forgotten. The horrors of Auschwitz, Birkenau, Treblinka, and other death camps stand as a chilling testament to the depths of human depravity. These places of unimaginable suffering are now memorials, reminding us of the consequences of hatred and intolerance. The liberation of these camps revealed the full extent of the Nazis' crimes to the world, shocking the conscience of humanity. The Holocaust was a unique crime, but it was not the only atrocity committed during the war. Across the globe, other horrific acts were perpetrated. Mass graves and scenes of devastation were found in many countries, each telling a story of suffering and loss. The war created an environment where the value of human life was diminished, and atrocities became all too common. From the rape of Nanking to the Bataan Death March, civilians became targets. These events were marked by extreme brutality and a complete disregard for human dignity. In Nanking, hundreds of thousands of civilians were massacred, and in the Bataan Death March, prisoners of war were subjected to inhumane conditions and treatment. These atrocities highlight the widespread suffering inflicted upon innocent people during the war, and the Geneva Conventions designed to protect non-combatants were routinely ignored. The principles meant to safeguard human rights were trampled upon, leading to widespread suffering and loss. After the war, the world sought justice through war crimes trials, but the scars left by these atrocities remain. It is a stark reminder of the need for vigilance in protecting human rights and ensuring that such horrors are never repeated. Section 6. Turning the tide. Allied victories and Axis defeats. Despite early setbacks, the tide of war slowly began to turn. The Battle of Stalingrad, a brutal months-long siege in the heart of Russia, broke the back of the German army in the east. In the Pacific, the U.S. Navy's victory at the Battle of Midway crippled Japan's naval power, shifting the balance of power in the Pacific theater. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy, France, in the largest amphibious invasion in history. D-Day, as it became known, marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. As Allied forces advanced, they liberated concentration camps, exposing the horrors of the Holocaust to the world. Section 7. The Price of Peace. A World Rebuilds. On September 2, 1945, Japan formally surrendered, bringing an end to World War II. The cost of victory had been staggering. Tens of millions lay dead, cities lay in ruins, and the world grappled with the unimaginable suffering it had endured. The war left an indelible mark on the global landscape, redrawing borders, toppling empires, and ushering in a new world order. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, their rivalry shaping the decades that followed. Yet amidst the devastation, there was hope. The world, weary of war, yearned for peace and stability. Section 8. Justice and Remembrance Trials, Tributes, and the United Nations. In the aftermath of the war, the international community sought to hold the perpetrators of wartime atrocities accountable. The devastation left behind was a stark reminder of the horrors that had unfolded, and there was a collective resolve to ensure that such events would never be repeated. This resolve led to the establishment of tribunals that would bring justice to those who had committed unspeakable crimes. The Nuremberg trials held in Germany brought Nazi leaders to justice for their crimes against humanity. These trials were unprecedented in their scope and significance, marking the first time that international law was applied to hold individuals accountable for war crimes. The world watched as high-ranking officials were prosecuted, and the proceedings set a powerful precedent for future international justice. The trials established the principle that individuals, regardless of their position, could be held accountable for war crimes. This was a monumental shift in the way justice was perceived on a global scale. It underscored the idea that no one was above the law, and that justice could reach even the highest echelons of power. The Nuremberg trials became a symbol of the international community's commitment to upholding human rights and the rule of law. Across the globe, memorials were erected and museums established to honor the memory of those who died, and to ensure that the lessons of the war would never be forgotten. These sites serve as poignant reminders of the past, educating future generations about the consequences of hatred and intolerance. They stand as tributes to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring quest for peace. In 1945, representatives from 50 nations gathered in San Francisco to create the United Nations, an international organization dedicated to preventing future wars and promoting peace and cooperation among nations. The founding of the United Nations marked a new era of diplomacy and collective security. It was a bold step towards a more unified world, where dialogue and collaboration would replace conflict and division. The United Nations continues to play a crucial role in addressing global challenges and fostering international cooperation. Section 9. Echoes of the Past, Lessons for the Future. World War II stands as a stark reminder of the human capacity for both good and evil. The war, which engulfed nations and continents, brought out the best and worst in humanity. It showcased the depths of cruelty and the heights of bravery. The devastation left in its wake was a testament to the destructive power of hatred and intolerance. It is a story of unimaginable suffering, but also of courage, resilience, and the triumph of the human spirit over adversity. Amidst the chaos, countless acts of heroism and kindness emerged, reminding us of the enduring strength of compassion and solidarity. The war's end brought relief and a renewed hope for a better future. The war taught us the importance of international cooperation, the fragility of peace, and the necessity of building institutions that promote dialogue and understanding. The formation of the United Nations was a direct response to the need for a platform where nations could come together to resolve conflicts peacefully, and the dangers of unchecked hatred and intolerance. The rise of totalitarian regimes and the spread of propaganda showed how easily societies could be manipulated into committing atrocities. It is a stark warning of what can happen when prejudice and bigotry are allowed to flourish unchecked. It is our duty to remember the lessons of this conflict, to ensure that the memories of those who suffered and sacrificed are never forgotten. Memorials and remembrance ceremonies serve as poignant reminders of the past, urging us to reflect on the consequences of war and the value of peace, to honor the sacrifices of those who fought for freedom, and to recognize the bravery of those who stood against tyranny. Their stories inspire us to uphold the principles of justice and liberty in our own lives, and to work tirelessly to prevent such horrors from ever happening again. This requires vigilance, education, and a commitment to fostering a culture of peace and mutual respect. By learning from the past, we can build a future where such tragedies are not repeated. For in the words of philosopher George Santayana, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Let us heed this warning and strive to create a world where the lessons of history guide our actions towards a more just and peaceful future.